Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. We can begin the press conference. Gabi, Zimmer and Mr. Glezos are here, so I'll give the floor to the chair of the group, Mrs. Gabi Zimmer. Hello. On behalf of my group, I'd like to welcome you to the press conference. My friend and comrade Manolis, Glezos and I invited you to this press conference, which is on the open question of reparation payments from Germany to Greece arising from the time of the war and the occupation. And when I first got to know Manolis Glezos here in Parliament, I found out about the commitment which he has been investing in this for many years with other Greek citizens of many different political parties. And the longer I've dealt with this, and the more I've read Mr. Glezos' articles from the past and have had a look at a book which he wrote and discussed it with him, then the more it became clear to me personally that because of the further discussion there is about the development of Greece and the way in which the Greek government and the German government in particular have behaved in the past, it seems necessary to raise this point as well. It looks as if it has fallen into oblivion, and I think that for another reason it's very interesting, particularly this week and with a view to next week as well, to draw attention to it. Next week, it's 25 years anniversary since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and everybody's talking about it in the media at the moment and saying that this introduced a new phase to European history, and that's true, but people tend to forget one thing. People forget that after the 9th of November, two German states got together which were very different and assumed their responsibility to the Second World War very differently as well. The GDR paid 130 times reparations to the war more than the other side. The Federal Republic so far has made reparation payments regarding forced labour and also compensation for damage caused during the occupation time. These payments have not been made, and I think that historic events and also the refusal of politicians to assume responsibility for this has had very long-term consequences. For the GDR, it meant that until the end of 1989, well, I wouldn't say it suffered, but it was aware of the consequences of paying reparations, and nobody in the GDR ever questioned this. It was accepted. We knew why this happened. But in the Federal Republic of Germany, this was forgotten about. And I think that now we need to remember that 25 years ago a new step was taken in the direction of Europe. And now it is necessary to remember this and at the same time to make it clear that mutual respect for life and also the conditions, the actual consequences on a society in a country which needs to develop its economy means that people must be able to live decently together, and so this kind of thing is eminently important. And I'm not trying to take words out of the mouth of Manolis. He's the one who knows exactly really what the questions which still need to be discussed, and he can make it clear what people in Greece think about this. But personally, I am convinced that it is urgently necessary in the Federal Republic of Germany as well for this to be discussed. If now, following the crisis and in connection with the crisis, and when we see the way in which people tend to behave with one another with a lack of respect, that's another reason why it's important to discuss this. They left the Linke in Germany 2 weeks ago at a party meeting, made a decision that they, Die Linke, would call upon the federal government to raise the question of reparation payments to Greece and to put that back on the agenda, so that there would be talks, so that everybody would bear in mind this joint responsibility, so that people couldn't evade it and just forget about what has happened. And I think that it's even more important than the actual payments, which will have to be debated. It is even more important to take account of this symbolic act and to practice this new type of behaviour and dealing with one another. So I hope that in the Linke in Germany we will get this sort of debate back on the agenda, and if this is a contribution to our increasing respect for people, for people's lives in Germany, and raising this question in the media, then I think that that would be an enormous achievement. So I'm prepared to try this, and I'd like to support Manolis, Glezos and all the other friends who are trying to carry out this task. I want to assure them of my solidarity. And now I'll give the floor to Manolis. Thank you, Gabi. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you very much. Yes, as you said, it's a symbolic day. A symbolic day because a Greek subject is being elevated into a European subject. It's being raised to a different level. But I don't just want to emphasize that point. What I'd like to emphasize is the aspect of the form assumed by this campaign. It's not a Greek campaign, it's a Greco-German campaign now. And I'd like to wish a warm welcome to I'd like to salute the Belgian workers who are on strike today. I was told by somebody that the strike is an impediment, a barrier, but no, it isn't. Those who are on strike in Belgium are fighting, and we too are beginning a fight today with this new attempt that we're now undertaking. So this press conference is particularly important if one thinks about a very important fact. That is that centuries ago, 1821, when people were fighting for liberation, a Greek held a flag in his hands. He was a member of the resistance and he was killed by a shot, and then somebody else came and picked up the flag and raised the flag again, and that was a German. Friedrich Gustav Mendelssohn. Friedrich Gustav Mendelssohn was the name of that person, and we should respect that German and all other Germans, because these were volunteers from Germany who helped the Greek people. They supported the Greek people in their revolution. So that's something that I want to raise and pay tribute to. And that's why we have this Greco-German, German-Greco alliance. And it isn't simply by chance. It isn't simply by chance that I'm here in the same party, the same political party as Gabi Zimmer. So I wanted to emphasize that point in particular. I've got no problems with the German people, and I don't think that the German people is really responsible for all the crimes committed by the Third Reich against the Greek people. I think that we are calling for a re-establishment of law, and that's what was written in the past, in 1995. We have to try to achieve these rights. So, as I said, it's a question of restoring rights, restoring law. And I think that the German school which invited me recently gave me an opportunity, on the basis of a discussion with school children, to draw one conclusion. And I think it is possible for the German people and the Greek people to establish the pillars for a bridge of friendship between our peoples. And if we're able to reinforce this friendship between our two peoples and continue to develop this friendship, then it will be possible to change Europe and to give Europe a new face, so that it will be a Europe of the peoples and the people, not just Europe of NATO or Europe of Merkel. It'll be Europe of the peoples. And that's important for the future. And of course, as I said, I'm not questioning the responsibility of the German people. It's the Third Reich which was responsible. So I think that it's like if a parent commits a crime, it's not the child's fault. And in the same way, we don't want to blame the German people for what happened in the Third Reich. And if I hear the official representatives of Greece who ask for forgiveness, I wonder why they're doing that. Are they identifying themselves with the Third Reich and asking for forgiveness? No, they don't need to do that. They don't need to ask for forgiveness. We don't identify them with the Third Reich. It's not even the German government. We don't put them on the same footing as the Third Reich. We just want a restoration of rights, of justice. And really, I don't need to say much more than that. Gabi and I will answer any questions you may have on the documents you've received. So perhaps you have questions, or even the most difficult ones, you can put them now.
Thank you, Manolis. We can open the question time for the journalists, of course. Please.
Hi, Nikolai Nielsen, E-Observer. I had a question for Zimmer. You mentioned the Linke had wanted to put this on the agenda. Were they successful in their attempts?
The discussion and the decision was made in October this year. That is in the group, the political group, and in the political bodies of Die Linke. They are now discussing it and doing everything they can to put pressure on the Federal Republic government so that they raise this subject and enter talks with the Greek government. But of course it's a little early to say yet whether this has achieved any results. It always takes a while. And you know that the public in Germany is very much influenced by the large media and steered by the large media, and it will be a great success if we manage, after a few articles which have appeared in the media, it'll be a great success for us if we do manage to spread this subject throughout the media in Germany.
Other questions? Please.
Yes, I'm from the Dinea newspaper, I'd like to put two questions to you. Could it be third parties who make a decision about this? For example, if two people are in conflict with one another, then this goes to court. Is there a third party, an arbitrator, a negotiator, who could perhaps make a decision in this case, so that this historic issue could be sorted out once and for all in the courts, for example?
Das lässt sich wirklich schlecht beantworten.
Well, it's very difficult to answer. It's interesting, but I must say that there were conferences held after the war, and they tried to decide what to do. And I think that there was Cyprus IV negotiations between the Federal Republic and GDR, and it was decided that this wouldn't be raised anymore, and this was a vacuum, because the negotiations at the time were at the debtors' conference and in 1953, and it was said explicitly that the reparations would not be brought into mind in the burden of the debt, and the conferences were for the Federal Republic, but quite different conditions were laid down for the GDR. In the Potsdamer Convention, it was said, for example, that the powers in Germany were entitled to seek reparations in their respective zones. So it was both in seeking reparations in terms of money and in products as well. But then nothing more happened. So who's going to clear this up? I don't know whether there is some sort of international dispute settlement body. It doesn't really belong to an international court or at any other international level in that sense. I think it might be difficult, but it would be interesting to investigate that. And it might be a good idea to get a study or a legal opinion drawn up on that. Of course, it's a very interesting question, and I think that in Greece in the past, this was the same situation. It was a good way to try to find a solution to a conflict, to bring in a third party. But now we're in a situation where one is the strong partner and one is the weak partner, and so we wonder where the solution can lie. Gabi outlined it perfectly correctly. I could perhaps describe this in a different way. That is a definitive solution, the final solution, the killing of all Jews. This affected Jews who worked in different factories. They were workers and Jews, and when they were killed, there was nobody who could do their work for them. They simply disappeared. And when they were liberated, most of them migrated to the USA, and they took their problems to the American courts, and they received compensatory payments. So for all the war years, they received a certain amount plus compensation. And in addition to that, they were given moral compensation, if you like, through the recognition of what had happened to them. But those who went to Germany, well, Germany convened an international conference, and then the international conference said that they were forced laborers. So that was the legal definition used at the time. But now we're in a situation in which demands for compensation from Greece to Germany is still an unanswered question, and the question has to be answered, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. And that is why the Reparations Commission, which looked at the matter, has passed on the matter to the Supreme Court. And so I'd like to point out once again that out of the 73,000 requests, more than 5,000 of these forced labourers received compensation following a court decision. And there are some who no longer are alive. But even those people have received compensation. It's easy to see what sort of lives those people had and how they achieved compensation. That can all be proved historically, and that is why one of the reasons why we believe that we all have to act together to clarify the situation now.
Autre question, en attendant que les journalistes réfléchissent.
Are there any further questions while the journalists think this over? We have a question from Twitter.
In order to put these issues in the agenda of the European Parliament. Et je salue aussi la présence du vice.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Papadimounis, the Vice President of the European Parliament, who's here with us.
Ja, vielleicht kann ich vorher noch.
Yes, perhaps before that I could go back. There is an answer from the German government from the year 2010 to a question which was put in the Bundestag on reparation payments to Greece. And at that time, the government said, and I quote, Germany, since the end of the Second World War, has made large amounts of compensatory payments to which the states should pass on to their nationals. Many of the reparations amounting to $20 billion decided on at the Alta Conference have been paid. And then the German government says that reparations are still possible more than 60 years after the war. And in practice, they are a special case without precedent. But I don't think that these are unprecedented special cases now. I would agree with Manolis Glezos that it's a matter of taking a step towards other peoples. And I don't think that we can even sort this out legally or purely legally. It would be an important sign, an important signal of our joint coexistence. Manolis and I have often discussed what we could do to hold this debate in the European Parliament, but it's very difficult because in the European Parliament we would only be able to get this bilateral issue on the agenda under very special circumstances. Our first idea was that this should be raised on the occasion of the anniversary of the beginning of the World War, and we could raise this in a debate in the European Parliament, and I would have happily given my time, my speaking time as chairperson, to Manolis Glezos. But unfortunately, and this is one of the realities of life in the European Parliament, the Conference of Presidents at the time said or decided that they didn't want to hold a debate on the outbreak of the Second World War in the European Parliament because they didn't believe that people would really assume their responsibility. They were afraid of statements being made by right-wing extremists. And because of that, the debate wasn't organised. The fear was in the European Parliament that a debate on the outbreak of the Second World War would be exploited by right-wing extremists. And the whole thing would tarnish the image of the European Parliament. Well, I regretted that decision, and it was simply boiled down to a statement by the President of Parliament on which there was no discussion. I hope that we will be able to find further possibilities. And my request to colleagues from other groups, and we'll take action together, is that as many different political groups as possible raise this request so that we can have a debate on this subject. From my point of view, that's the only way which is possible, which can be successful. And so I'd like to ask Greek and German members in the other political groups to take an interest in this and to stand up for it. And I think that one initial step would be for Manolis and I myself, together with other members, to hold a meeting, a workshop, at least to draw the attention of members of Parliament to this, and then try to prepare for a debate in Parliament. I think that would be the most helpful thing, to prepare for a debate and to attract the attention of other members of Parliament so that it isn't just a bilateral problem between two countries. It really is a question of the whole European future.
We have time for the last question.
My name is Wasim Ibrahim from Safir newspaper. For Madam Zimmer and for the MEP, if you could please explain for audience that they don't know much about this issue, why in a continent where is the main value is the rule of law, you can't solve this issue by going to court or something like this and waiting for a political debate? Is it a political issue or a legal issue, and why it's not solved yet? Thank you.
Yes, of course, it's a political and an economic and a diplomatic and a cultural and moral issue. So the problem has many different facets, and I'd like to emphasize the following. And these are questions I address to the current German government. At the Paris conference in 1946, debts were paid to all other countries but not to Greece. The second point is that loans were taken out by Poles, Greeks and Germans and Yugoslavs, and the loans were paid back to Poland and Yugoslavia but not to Greece. And on the Italians, there was the Paris conference, and it was decided there that the Axis would pay so much to which particular countries. And in Paris it was determined who would pay what to which country: Bulgaria to Greece and Italy to Greece. And the question now is whether the Italians and the Bulgarians they paid. Those two countries did pay, and as I said, they've paid their debt, but the German government didn't. The German government excluded itself, but according to what right? So I would say that this is a moral question. The current German government claims that there was a struggle in Crete. Now, why is it reacting like this? Perhaps because we made a contribution to the situation today. I really wonder why Germany is adopting this attitude to Greece.
Nur noch
Just a reference to something I said at the beginning. In 1946, property was confiscated and all this forms part of the Paris Agreement. And estimates are that 50 billion US dollars worth of property was confiscated. And then at the 1953 conference, the calculations from all the compensation paid so far was excluded. All the compensation paid until that date was calculated and deducted from the debts which still had to be paid by Germany. So legally speaking, it would be very difficult to start to unravel this. And Germany was advised that it shouldn't insist on the paid compensation being included in the calculations again. And Germany was advised to drop the question of reparations. And I think that this is where a lot of the problem we're dealing with today arises from. Germany says that at the 1953 debtors' conference, its reparation commitments had been met. But that is not the case. And that's something that we've got to say quite clearly. Are there any further questions? Well, we've already gone beyond time, so I'd like to thank the interpreters. If there are no further questions, well, there are many general questions which have to be answered. Mr. Schäuble said that the subject is over and done with. And my answer to that is one I gave straight away. I said, if you think that it's over and done with, then this does raise a problem. Mr. Schäuble, can you tell me when this was over and done with and how? And he never answered that second question. And then he said we should leave the past alone and look forwards. Okay, but why? Why was it decided by the Federal Republic of Germany not only to pay compensation to the surviving Jews whose parents were the victims of Nazi terror? They have been compensated, but they receive pensions but there's no deadline on that. So is it going to go on forever to all the successors, the survivors? Will they receive pensions? Is that not a form of compensation? So, Mr. Schäuble, is that the past or is it the future? So it's very important to raise that point about what Mr. Schäuble said. And another point, it was said that it was only the compulsory loans which came into question, and There was no other question relating to reparations arising from the Paris conference. Well, if that were the case, then Greece would have to pay back the money given to it by Italy and Bulgaria. So that would be ridiculous. I've heard all sorts of crazy, ridiculous things like that. I've heard all sorts of things. Thank you. Thank you.